we spent $1 billion and elected Donald Trump. That's not a blame game. That's called accountability. And the people at the top of the campaign, the top of the party, have a lot of people who are pissed off at him because there were people who had suggestions. There were people who were saying, why are we doing this? Why this? It was like, hey, we've got it. We've got this special magical computer formulation. We've tested every ad. Shut up and sit down and go back to work. And so people said, okay, well, I guess you're right. And then we got clobbered, clocked, knocked down, beat up, drugged down. And so people are mad, and they should be mad. And the people at the top are going to have to listen. There is a grassroots rebellion happening in this party, and it's coming to knock on the door of the people who are in charge of the party. That's not blame game. That's accountability.
Accountability. I mean, and I know you're for $1 billion.
$1 billion.
And I believe they technically, blew a few $100 million of that in the recent weeks, Andrew Yang, and now ended up technically maybe in debt a little bit.
Let's start from the beginning.
Democratic endorsements are continuing to roll in for Vice President Kamala Harris as she begins her campaign for the presidency.
Within 24 hours of President Joe Biden announcing he's dropping out of the race, Team Harris says it's raised $81 million. The campaign says it's received donations from more than 800,000 grassroots donors, 60% of whom made their first contribution to this campaign cycle.
The VP shattering records. Her campaign says they've raised $310 million last month. That amount does include donations made when Biden was still the candidate, and the $200 million raised in the first week of Harris's candidacy. The campaign says 94% of it came from donations under $200 and 2/3 from first-time donors.
For a lot of different reasons, this was going to be an election that incumbents were going to have a very, very hard time holding on to in this country. And to then say, well, if we'd had a primary and, a knife fight between some unknown group of Democrats, one would have emerged who would have been a stronger candidate than Kamala Harris and somehow run a better campaign than what we just saw in that 107-day sprint where she raised $1 billion and ran an almost flawless campaign. It just wasn't enough to over.
Many people would disagree with that, but
well, it was
going 0 for 7 in the swing states means it's not very flawless.
Well, other than the
going 0 for 7 and losing the popular vote, there are a few things in the way of flawless.
I don't think that speaks to the campaign. You worked for Kamala Harris.
I didn't. I'm a donor.
You're a donor.
Technically, I mean, I'm not on anyone's payroll. I'm not beholden to anyone. That's why I'm here telling the truth. I'm not here to gaslight anybody. This is just the truth.
And what is the truth?
The truth is this is just an epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster. Actually, it was $1.018 billion, I think, right? There were $20 million or $18 million in debt.
Right.
It's incredible. And I raised millions of that. I have friends that I have to be accountable to and to explain what happened because I told them it was a margin of error race. I was promised, Jen O'Malley Dillon promised all of us that Harris would win. She even put videos out saying that Harris would win. I believed her. My donors believed her. And so they wrote massive checks. I feel like a lot of us were misled. And even on the night of election night, I looked somebody in the eye and I said, are we going to do this? Are we going to pull it off? She told me yes. And I asked somebody else, how are you feeling? He's like, we're going to win Iowa. And I was like, what?
And the Harris campaign now in debt, $20 million. Lindy Lee, one member of the DNC's finance committee, says she and others were misled about the vice president's chance of winning the election. Lee says she helped raise millions for the campaign and now has to explain to donors why Harris lost. Just one example of their spending. The Harris campaign spent $450,000 a day. This was on ads displayed in Las Vegas, and now staff members and vendors are worried they may not get paid. News Nation's Kelly Meyer has been following this story and joins us live from the White House with the very latest. Kelly?
Yeah, the election may be over, but the mountain of debt from the short-lived campaign isn't going away fast enough for them. The Harris campaign trying to dig out of debt nearly a week after their resounding loss. And much of the spending was on digital media advertising, polling, and travel from state to state. According to the reports, the Harris campaign spending 6 figures building a set for Harris's appearance on the Call Her Daddy podcast with host Alex Cooper. A source familiar with the campaign confirming to News Nation the reporting that the Harris campaign was $20 million in the hole after November 5th. And even though the campaign took in at least $1 billion and reported $118 million in the bank as of October 16th. They're still seeing that $20 million in the hole. Another big ticket price, the $15 million the Harris campaign spent on event production. That also went towards the celebrity performances leading up to the election, like that election eve rally with Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Ricky Martin. And Harris also reportedly paid $1 million to Harpo Productions. That's owned by Oprah. Oprah, we know, did a town hall with Harris back in September and appeared with Harris at her election eve rally in Philadelphia. And one GOP strategist putting it to us this way today, saying, quote, damned if you do, damned if you don't, giving the example of John Kerry having been criticized for still having $14 million unspent after his 2004 campaign. The strategist, though, called Harris's debt, quote, egregious, and that they were panic spending in the very end.
Is that it?
No, there's more.
3 election cycles in a row that the morons who run the Democratic Party decided not to address progressives or populists or anyone who was undecided about Gaza or anything else. Instead, they gave it to the compliant press. How'd that work out for you?
Not so great, and it did lead to the campaign not only squandering over $1 billion, but also exiting the race with debt. So let's get to these details. So there's a new report out by Gabe Kaminsky from Washington Examiner. They actually looked at the disclosures and filings of the Harris campaign to see how much money they raised, where the money went, and boy, is it a doozy. So for instance, in mid-October, by the way, let me just be clear. Harris didn't run a full campaign. She ran a campaign for 3 months, raised a record amount of money, over $1 billion, and somehow spent that within 3 months. So in mid-October, the Harris campaign disclosed that it had spent over $880 million this election, almost $526 million greater than the roughly $354 million that the Trump campaign had disclosed spending, according to a Washington Examiner analysis of federal filings. Much of the Harris campaign spending was allocated for digital media advertising, polling, and travel from state to state, including to a private jet company called Advanced Aviation. Now, between July 22nd and Election Day specifically, the campaign and its affiliated committees spent upwards of $654 million on advertising alone. And that included spending $450 a day to be shown on the Sphere in Las Vegas.
Cringe, definition of cringe.
Real
Jesus.
Persuasive. I mean, how are you not gonna vote for the lady on the Sphere?
They spent $450,000 a day on that ad. I mean, they're just burning your money.
We need to construct a Sphere.
Jesus Christ, man. There's nothing in that sphere, that's the problem.
Yeah, totally. So the Harris campaign also spent a 6-figure sum to fly pro-Harris banners over 4 football games, NFL games, with teams from 6 out of the 7 swing states. Didn't appear to be very persuasive, but there was money spent beyond ads, right? So according to the filings obtained by the Washington Examiner, political, digital, and media consultants were also paid a handsome sum of money, $12.8 million by the Harris campaign. One vendor, Village Marketing Agency, received over $3.9 million and reportedly worked to recruit thousands of social media influencers to boost Harris online. Event production was also a staple spending area of the Harris campaign, which notably hosted a star-studded lineup of musicians from Lady Gaga to Katy Perry for an election eve rally. The campaign also paid more than $15 million for event production, including spending 6 figures to build a set for the Call Me Daddy podcast appearance, which wasn't actually filmed at the usual set. She wanted the podcast host to fly to her in Washington, D.C. And so they wanted to give the appearance that it was filmed in the usual set. And so they rebuilt a replica set in DC in order to do that podcast. So let's take a look at this video. This is confirmed by the podcast host, Alex Cooper.
So we rebuilt basically my studio in DC.
So here, if you want to look.
We brought the dad pad to Washington. That's crazy. This looks so similar. All right, guys, she's about to be here. Wish me luck.
Good luck.
Yeah. So
the defense rests.
You've disconnected from the hive mind. Explain.